Today we're talking about wheat and weeds and how weeds can be a problem. Usually we think of weeds as a problem because we don't want them around at all. But that's not what Jesus is getting at here. Weeds can be around and they're not necessarily a problem. Here you can see I got weeds in my tomatoes, and that's okay. Even in a decorative garden, weeds aren't necessarily a problem. Which of these plants here are weeds? It's hard to tell, so I don't go crazy pulling out the weeds. I think everything looks okay. But in today's gospel story, Jesus is talking about a specific kind of plant that really is a problem. It's not a problem just because it's a weed. It's a problem because it can actually be pretty harmful. In the story, Jesus mentions a plant called a tare or a darnel. Now, a darnel isn't just a plant that takes resources from what you're trying to grow. It doesn't just get in the way. It can actually make you pretty sick if you get it mixed up and process it with your wheat. So in the story, someone planted some tares or darnel in with the wheat, and that could really cause some harm. Now, our gut tells us maybe rip it out, get rid of it. That's what the people in the story want to do. But not only is it hard to tell the difference between the two, ripping out the darnel risks harming the wheat. So in the story, Jesus says, just leave it. Even though it's potentially harmful and it steals resources from the wheat, Jesus says to leave it. And this tells us two things. First, God is generous. God provides the care and the tending for both the wheat and the darnel. Second, God's focus in this story isn't on rooting out the tares or the darnel, but it's on building up the wheat so it can be fruitful and nourishing. And that's good news for us. Because sometimes we can be like wheat, and sometimes we can be like tares. But in either case, God takes care of us. And it's good news also because it shows us a better way to live with each other. We get to focus more on helping each other and ourselves to be more like wheat. We get to focus on being and doing that which brings nourishment and satisfaction to others. This doesn't mean there's no difference between the wheat and the weeds, and it doesn't mean that we can never point out the difference. You can obviously become observant enough to tell the difference and know which things you want to keep and which things you want to ditch. Even just looking at these pictures now, I think you can spot some differences between the wheat and the weeds. But remember, Jesus uses this story to talk about the importance of focusing on what the wheat does. And if we're going to be following Jesus, we need to do those things that are immediately fruitful and life-giving. That's good news. And that's what Jesus is calling us to be and do right now. Be life-giving and fruitful. There they are. See those little darker seeds right there? Yeah. The smaller seeds. Try not to put a shadow on my hand. These are the wheat here. Those are the weed seeds. And if you were to grind up these weed seeds and they ended up in your flour, they could ruin your flour because some of these kinds of grasses can be actually harmful to humans.